All right. So Donald Trump just got slapped with an absolutely massive $450 million fine from the state of New York as a part of this fraud trial that we've been tracking over the last number of months, right? So essentially what this revolved around, and I'm going to show you some of the details here from this New York Times article, but it was basically this trial that was dealing with his years and years and years in New York as this con man business type to basically lie on his taxes and undervalue the value of his properties on his taxes to get a lower tax bill, and then turning around and whenever he wanted to get some sort of a loan from a bank, he would drastically inflate his asset valuations, right? So I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, corruption here, pretty cut and dry fraud that Trump was committing. Now the $450 million mark is pretty substantial. They didn't go as far as they potentially could have done by basically dissolving the Trump organization, but this is I think more than most people thought that it was going to be. So a little bit of details here. They say on Friday, this Judge Engoron, Arthur Engoron, overseeing Mr. Trump's civil fraud case, issued a final ruling that inflicted a staggering financial penalty with interest. The former president has been ordered to pay the state of New York about $450 million, a sum that threatens to wipe out a stockpile of cash that Trump has, apparently, of stocks and bonds that he's amassed since leaving the White House, according to the New York Times. He will have only 30 days or so to come up with the money or persuade an outside bond company to basically cover it for him as he goes through this appeals process. Right now, I highly doubt that the appeals process is going to end up in his favor, but we'll have to see how it all plays out. They say the judge, Arthur F. Engoron, also imposed several new restrictions on Mr. Trump and his family businesses like the Trump Organization. So for 3 years, Mr. Trump cannot run any New York company, including portions of his own, nor can he obtain a loan from a New York bank. So basically shutting him down for the next 3 years. Now this also applies, as they point out here, to his 2 adult sons for a 2-year period. Okay, so the Trump family, the core of the Trump family, I guess, if you will, is essentially banned from doing business for the next couple of years in New York, right? And they also say, and this is kind of the funniest part here, the family business will be under the thumb of a watchful outsider, a court-appointed monitor who can hamstring the company if she does not like what she sees. So on top of sort of being temporarily banned for a couple of years from doing business in New York, you're also going to have a court-appointed overseer who is going to be monitoring every single decision that the Trump Organization or his businesses make within New York and, flagging it, I guess, if she sees something wrong with it. So that's probably going to be one of the most annoying parts about this for Trump himself. Now, in terms of whether or not he can pay this or what this process is going to look like, right? Because, Donald Trump loves to boast as, being this billionaire, a business type from New York and all of that good stuff. But, does he actually have the money to pay for this? How would he go about paying this? Well, they say here that while Mr. Trump appeals the financial penalty, he will have to either come up with the money or secure a bond within 30 days of when the court enters a judgment against him. So I guess that clock is sort of starting now. And if he obtains it from a bonding company, rather than posting the bond himself, he will not have to pay the penalty until his appeal is resolved. The company providing the bond just basically guarantees the state that Trump has the money to eventually pay the bond, and then he doesn't have to pay it in the meantime, but he's also going to have to pay them some sort of a collateral and a premium in order to, get that sort of an agreement with any of these companies. And as they say here that his lawyers are already trying to contact a lot of these companies that might post the bond, and, it's unclear whether or not they're going to actually reach a final deal on that. So they say his lawyers, we already just read that. If the penalty is upheld on appeal, the money will likely come from his own pocket rather than from political contributions. And they say also that in the last couple of years since he left office, he sold a couple of his properties, giving him a little bit of cash on hand. And he's also, of course, reached some of these recent deals with the Saudis, with like the Live Golf tournament and a real estate company, as well as for a housing and golf complex that was going to be built in Oman. Now, this aspect of it with the Saudis and the government of Oman, this is just like rank corruption. I mean, this on top of the multi-billion-dollar investment that Jared Kushner got from the Saudis as well right after Trump left office, it's just rank corruption. I mean, this should be in and of itself a violation of the Emoluments Clause. It should be, prosecutable in any reasonable society, right? I mean, what you have is Donald Trump, who is taking billions of dollars, and if you include Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, or at least millions of dollars as a part of these private business deals, and then turning around and doing favors for the Saudis, right? That's exactly what what's happening. I mean, that couple billion that Jared Kushner got from the Saudis is basically just an investment that the Saudis think if Trump comes back to power, he will be more amenable to give us more weapons or diplomatic cover or whatever the case may be. So that's what that was. Just rank corruption there, right? But they continue saying that as of last year, Mr. Trump was sitting on more than $350 million of cash and cash equivalents, according to the Times Review. They say in an interview under oath with Miss Letitia James' office last year, Mr. Trump said that the number was above 400 million, though they were unable to verify that amount. And so they say the penalty in Friday's decision, when combined with that other ruling, the $83.3 million judgment that he's facing from defamation of E. Jean Carroll, it adds up to more than $500 million, eclipsing his current collection of cash. Even for someone who measures his net worth in billions, that sum could leave Mr. Trump more financially vulnerable than he has been in decades. They go on to talk about how basically maybe he could sell some of his other properties, which is probably something he doesn't want to do. It doesn't look like he's going to go bankrupt from any of this, but it's definitely going to put a lot of pressure on him financially. And definitely, on top of that, with the 3-year ban of him doing real business in New York or getting loans from banks in New York, it's also going to be a hit. I mean, it's a hit to him financially. It's also a hit to him, just at a reputational basis, I guess, or to his ego, because he's always tried to portray himself as this wildly successful New York businessman, and now you've just been outed as like a rampant fraudster, and you're having to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in reparations for that fraud. Now, another funny part about this entire situation was Trump decided to basically put the politics above the actual legality of this case, which is an interesting strategy, right? Because on the one hand, yeah, if you go out and you attack this judge, and he does so, here I'll read this in a second, but you attack the judge of Engoron or any of these other numerous criminal cases, civil cases that he's been facing recently, that will contribute, most likely, to rallying the Republican base around you, because they feel like you are being unfairly targeted, you're under attack, we need to rally around Trump and protect our guy, right? So it may help you politically to go out and rail against all of these cases and these judges and prosecutors and whatever the case may be, but when it comes to the actual trial itself, that kind of political posturing is not going to help you. If anything, it's only going to hurt you. And so, I mean, this is just one example of him attacking Judge Engoron here, right? So he said this on Truth Social. He said, "Remember, the corrupt and radical Judge Engoron is a political hack who wouldn't give us a jury, wouldn't let this case go to the commercial division where it belongs, would have been terminated, incredibly, ignored the appellate court decision that struck down almost 90% of this fake lawsuit based on the statute of limitations, etc., and illegally and unconstitutionally gagged me and my lawyers in a brazen and blatant attempt to prevent us from bringing vital information to the public and the courts." Okay, so he had all of these attacks that he was publicly leveling against Engoron and all of these other cases as well. That's not going to help you in the courtroom, okay, point blank period. Now, the other amazing part of this is all of the defenses that Trump has been trying to argue, for himself as a part of this case. So I just want to run through this BBC article just real quick, some of the basic points on the main arguments that they have been making. His lawyer as well was an absolute embarrassment throughout this entire process. Like there were multiple instances where she would try to introduce something as evidence or bring something up during the trial, and then the judge Engoron would have to turn around and be like, "You didn't even submit this as a part of evidence," right? Because that's how courts usually work. Your defense will have to introduce whatever details or evidence or specifics that they want to ahead of time, so that the other side, the prosecution or whatever, can get a look at it, the judge can get a look at it, they can verify that it's accurate, and then you have a conversation about it in the trial. But they kept trying to bring up things that they never went through the process of formally introducing to be evidence in the trial, and then they would turn around and get mad that they couldn't talk about it. And the judge repeatedly had to yell at Trump's lawyer to be like, "Here's how you actually introduce things as evidence." She didn't know the very basics of how these kinds of trials are supposed to take place, right? So it was just shit like that was just embarrassing on the fundamentals of this kind of a trial, right? But just some of the arguments, right? One of the things that you hear people bring up, there were no victims. Okay, so nobody actually suffered as a result of Trump's fraud. Okay, well, they say under the New York statute that was brought against Trump, the Attorney General did not have to show that there were victims, only that Mr. Trump committed an ongoing fraud. So this one is just completely irrelevant to the actual case that they're talking about. Okay, another one. The case was timed to damage Trump's 2024 campaign. Now, whether or not it will damage his 2024 campaign, yet to be seen. We've seen the polling data that shows, again, that this helps him in the Republican primary. If he gets, fraud convictions like this, or if he loses any one of the other criminal cases against him, that could hurt him in the 2024 general election. I don't know that this one specifically will. It's not a criminal trial. It won't make him like a convict or anything like that necessarily. But, the pushback here that they put in this BBC article is basically a pretty simple one. That the investigation of the fraud claims began 4.5 years ago when Donald Trump was still in office, right? And Michael Cohen came out and he, accused the Trump organization of all of these different things, right? So the idea that like this just started, this year in the middle of 2024, an election year, is just wrong. That's not when the investigation started. Okay, Trump was denied a jury. This one is absolutely hilarious. So they say, after the judge's ruling last week, Mr. Trump made the claim in a social media post suggesting to his supporters that he had been denied a trial and a jury and therefore robbed of justice, right? A pretty big claim. But on Monday in court, the judge made a point to say that nobody asked for a jury trial. Okay, so basically, again, his incompetent lawyer team, they just didn't ask for a trial. Okay, they didn't ask for a jury trial, right? There was like a specific box they had to check. There was a process you have to go through to try to request that. They didn't do it. Okay, so you didn't get a jury trial. And then they turn around after their own legal team fucked that up, and then they say, well, this is evidence that it's rigged against us because they wouldn't give us a jury trial. That was on you. That was on you. You could have done it. You chose not to. And then you cry about it after the fact. One last one here, right? The corrupt Justice Department is behind this. Well, I mean, the simple pushback to this is New York state laws. The DOJ doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this. They don't have jurisdiction in this case, right? So, I mean, all of this is just kind of amazing. Number one, it shows kind of the people that Trump surrounds himself with, that even in a situation like this where hundreds of millions of dollars are at stake, he picks people to be on his legal team, or maybe those are the only people who would agree to join his legal team or stay on his legal team, who are just entirely incompetent in the process. And so he's going to get hit with a massive fee here. I mean, again, he's going to go through the legal, appeals process or whatever. I doubt that's necessarily going to change anything. Maybe it will delay it slightly. But this is going to be a huge blow to his ego. It's going to be a huge blow to his financial situation, which I don't think was, great to start with. And then on top of that, you add the E. Jean Carroll $83 million suit that he also just lost for like repeatedly defaming her. You also still have the Georgia case ongoing, which is a more, serious case, criminal case, even though that has a whole bunch of controversies surrounding it right now with Fani Willis and her like internal, issues and scandals that she's been plagued by recently. So, you also have the classified documents case. The Stormy Daniels one is upcoming as well. So you have a bunch more that Trump is slated to get hit with in the immediate future. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Is he actually going to be able to even pay these fines? How is this going to impact the 2024 election? Is it going to help rally his base around him because they think he's being targeted by the deep state and they're trying to take down his businesses and his political life? Or is this going to hurt him because maybe some normie Americans look at this and they say, yeah, this guy committed a bunch of crimes, he committed fraud, he's a con man, and he's being prosecuted justly. So, I don't know. We'll have to see how this all plays out.